The King's Avatar, Chapter 1530 Response, Negligence, Audio Source, WuShaWorldAudiobook.com. Chapter 1530 Response, Negligence. Translator, Nomyami. Editor, Nomyami. Dancing rain, boundless sea, and soft mist rushed forward together. Desert Dust, who was trapped by Wave Wheel Slasher, looked to be in a dire situation. However, no one forgot that this was a team competition. The broadcast no longer focused on Desert Dust and switched over to the others on Tyranny. Dazzling 100 Blossoms, -9 degrees, and Rota. Sure enough, the three long-ranged attackers had already set out. They moved like the wind, focusing their long-ranged attacks on Happy's healer, Little Cold Hands, who was standing far away at the back. He hadn't rushed over to attack Han Wenking like the others on Happy. Sacrifice Han Wenking for a trade. Tyranny's choice was truly brave, decisively abandoning their captain and their core player. As for Little Cold Hands, when he had been using Angel Wings, he had already been the main target for Tyranny's long-ranged attackers. Later, the sudden death charge directly into their formation from Yishu's Lord Grim had destroyed their little safe zone, leading to a slight strategic shift from Tyranny. As soon as they regained their footing, they continued to bite at Little Cold Hands. It was as if they didn't even see Desert Dust's predicament. What to do? Tyranny had been decisive. Now, it was Happy's turn to be troubled. With this trade, even though Happy would be able to eliminate Tyranny's captain, it would be at the sacrifice of their healer. In a one-to-one trade, the healer had to be prioritized. In the team competition, this was practically an established rule. Understanding this rule, Sumu Chung had dancing rain shift targets. Boom boom boom. Her explosions lifted a cloud of sand into the air, reducing the visibility that Tyranny's long-ranged attackers would have. But after those artillery shells exploded, it also led to a sudden change in the flow of the sand. Little Cold Hands, who had been standing there, felt the ground beneath him slip, and he fell onto his butt. The launcher's heavy firepower was far more destructive than the likes of a sharpshooter or Spitfire. On the other hand, Elementalists dealt magic damage. Their destructive abilities couldn't compare to physical attacks. Dancing Rain had created a wall of sand, obstructing the long-ranged attacks from Tyranny, just like she had intended. However, by blowing up a hole in the sand dune, the flow of sand suddenly accelerated. Careless. Quote, when Panlin saw Little Cold Hands slip and fall onto his butt, he criticized Sumu Chung. But that wasn't what Tyranny thought. Don't underestimate Sumu Chung's cunning. This was the lesson that they had just learned in the group arena. Tang Ro's soft mist had switched directions, and Little Cold Hands, who was sitting on the sand dune, was now sliding down the sand dune. Anyone with an eye for tactics should be able to understand. By accelerating the downward flow of the sand, Little Cold Hands would be able to get under the protection of his teammates faster. Blowing a hole into the sand dune and accelerating the flow of the sand definitely wasn't out of carelessness. It had been intentional. As for Little Cold Hands slipping and falling onto his butt, that had been intentional from Wenyi as well. He wasn't as technically skilled as Yishu and the others on Happy. Trying to control his character in the moving sand was very difficult for him. He understood Sumu Chung's intentions, but he wasn't confident in being able to adjust to the sudden increase in speed. As a result, he didn't force himself to. Instead, he fell down, letting the sand carry him. It was quite clever, and in a match, cleverness and decisiveness were often needed. Soft mist suddenly charged at Tyranny's long-ranged attackers, interfering with their attacks towards Little Cold Hands. Lord Grim and Boundless Sea teamed up on Desert Dust, with Dancing Rain supporting them. Happy had no intentions of letting Desert Dust go, and at the same time, they wanted to save Little Cold Hands. It was a brilliant response. Those who saw through Happy's solution praised them. Unfortunately, it stopped there. Happy's brilliant response wasn't able to be carried out to completion because they had overlooked a certain someone. Han Wenking. Han Wenking was being attacked from all sides, and it looked as if Happy wouldn't have any trouble dealing with Desert Dust, which was why everyone had focused on Wenyi's Little Cold Hands instead. Dancing Rain turned fire, Soft Mist switched directions. In that instant, Su Mucheng and Tang Ro indeed hadn't been worried about Han Wenking. After all, both Yi Shu and Fang Rui were there. But 1,000-ton drop. Desert Dust crashed to the ground, pressing on the loose sand with 1,000 tons of force. His two legs sunk deep into the sand. Following afterwards, a whirlpool seemed to be created. The surrounding flow of sand above it all changed directions towards the deep pit smashed out by Desert Dust's 1,000-ton drop. Of the four surrounding him, only Lord Grim, who was below him, had firm footing. The three above him, including Soft Mist who had switched directions, instantly lost their balance. 1,000-ton drop ignored grab skills. Even if Yi Shu had used a toss or a back throw, Desert Dust wouldn't have budged. Only a move like Wave Wheel Slasher, which used magic to create its own space, could seal Desert Dust's movements. However, Wave Wheel Slasher only lasted for so long, and it didn't interrupt 1,000-ton drop. As a result, when Wave Wheel Slasher ended, 1,000-ton drop continued. Happy's brilliant response was disrupted just like this by the trapped Desert Dust. Yi Shu immediately had Lord Grim attack. With Desert Dust's legs stuck in the sand, he wasn't going anywhere. Lord Grim's myriad manifestations umbrella transformed into a spear. A circle swing was just about to nab Desert Dust when he twisted around. Not good. Yi Shu's instincts were telling him to retreat, cancel and jump back. Yi Shu reacted extremely fast. The circle swing was cancelled, and Lord Grim jumped as far back as possible. However, the other three unhappy who were still regaining their balance couldn't react in time. Desert Dust finished turning around, and all three characters were pulled into his grasp. Spiraling Whirlwind. A level 70 grappler skill. Han Wenking had chosen this skill to put on his Desert Dust silver weapon, Flame Fist. Hua. Yellow sand burst into the sky. Desert Dust shot out of the ground. The spinning force produced by his two arms held tightly onto the three from Happy. They rose into the air along with Desert Dust, flipped upside down, and then crashed to the ground. Poo poo poo. Grab skills could not be quick recovered. The three slammed into the ground, creating 3 craters in the sand dunes and 3 waves of sand. Yi Shu's Lord Grim was in this area, but he didn't go and rescue his teammates. Instead, Lord Grim ran towards a different direction. It looked like he was in a hurry, yet he didn't use any movement skills. It wasn't that Yi Shu didn't want to, he couldn't. He could not save Su Mucheng and the others, and he could not increase his speed with a skill like Shin Cut. Because the moment he dodged that spiraling whirlwind, he stepped onto a sacred fire. Zhang Xinji, immovable rock. Han Wenking's most trusted partner had his back. Yi Shu's choice was out of helplessness. Unable to use any skills, he didn't dare fearlessly charge towards the enemy cleric. WuxaWorldAudio.com. If he moved any closer to Desert Dust, Han Wenking would probably give him 10 years' worth of revenge. The tides instantly shifted. The three unhappy had been thrown into the sand, while Desert Dust calmly landed. Trapping and suppressing him wasn't going to be possible anymore. However, the one in the most danger was Wenyi. Happy's response had been crushed instantly. Little Cold Hands was now sliding down into the mouth of the tiger. And when ye need to get up and run away. This time, and when ye being called Happy's weakness were no longer empty words. He tried his hardest to move his character in the river of sand. In the end, it looked like he was trying to doggy paddle his way up. The crowd laughed loudly seeing this scene, but not Tyranny. And when ye looked to be in a sorry state. Little Cold Hands wasn't moving gracefully at all, but his judgment was correct. The direction he chose to run away to was the worst possible direction for Tyranny. He had chosen to move towards the Lord Grim and immovable rock. But Tyranny wasn't worried at all. Previously, Happy had neglected the trapped Tan Wenking. This time, they had neglected Zhang Xinji. Tyranny's two corps had actually been overlooked. All three long-ranged attackers fired at Little Cold Hands. Multiple people targeting with a flustered rookie was much more efficient than Ye Zhu targeting an experienced Zhang Xinji. Tyranny's reasoning was that simple. They had confidence in themselves and in Zhang Xinji. And when Yi had picked the best possible option, but it wasn't enough to shake Tyranny. Happy's other three players had gotten up. When they saw the situation, they knew that they had to save Little Cold Hands. However, an imposing figure stood in their way. Han Wenking, Desert Dust. One person, ready for a 1v3. The crowd erupted. This was their captain. When they need him the most, 1v2, 1v3, 1v4, he wouldn't retreat. This bravery had never faltered no matter how much time had passed. Even if he was beginning to play more flexibly, when brute force was needed, he would proudly stand at the front. 10 years, just like the past. End chapter. The King's Avatar, Chapter 1531 Dependable Scheme. Audio source, wushaworldaudiobook.com. Chapter 1531, Dependable Scheme. Translator, Nomyami. Editor, Nomyami. Wind continued to blow, and sand continued to fill the sky. Han Wenking's 1v3 wasn't simply out of bravery. Tyranny had chosen this map specifically, and he was taking advantage of it perfectly. Desert Dust moved effortlessly and nimbly compared to his three opponents. From time to time, his attacks would strike the sand, producing a change in the flow of sand. For Happy, it was an enormous hindrance. Fang Rui and Su Mucheng could rely on their experience to adapt to the flow of sand. However, with Han Wenking constantly changing the flow, they had to focus much of their efforts onto adapting to the sand beneath them. As for Tang Rou, she was having an even more difficult time. Her experience in glory was lacking, and had to rely on her reaction speed and hand speed to deal with the sand. The amount of effort she had to put in just to move around was frightening. As such, Han Wenking was able to hold them off despite it being a 1v3. He didn't need to win over his opponents. He just needed to keep them here until his teammates took care of Happy's Little Cold Hands. Happy obviously understood what Tyranny intended to do. Ye Zhu's Lord Grim continued to pursue Zhang Xinji's immovable rock. He trusted his teammates. If they could get past Han Wenking and get to An Wenyi, forming a defensive wall for him, and Wenyi could start putting his healing to use, it would become a 4v4 with Happy having the upper hand. Happy would have a healer, while Tyranny would not. What's more, Tyranny's healer would be in a 1v1 against Ye Zhu. Ye Zhu's decision to pursue Zhang Xinji's immovable rock seemed like it had been out of helplessness due to the sacred fire. But now, it had become a key chess piece on the board. However, for this chess piece to shine, it needs Su Mucheng, Fang Rui, and Tang Rou to break open the situation. 3v1 breakthrough. The task given to them didn't seem hard at all. Those who understood Happy's strategy felt amazed at Ye Zhu's decision to target a movable rock. To them, it was a godlike play that would turn the tides of the match. But no one would have expected that the three unhappy would be unable to get past Han Wenqing. You couldn't blame the three for not trying. Neither of them were playing poorly. The pro players watching the match put themselves in their shoes. Facing Han Wenqing's attacks, none of them felt like they would be able to break out of his blockade easily. It takes time to adapt to the sand. They looked at the flow of the sand and how desert dust was constantly changing the direction of the flow. They thought to themselves, how would they break through this situation? It was a habit that pro players had to improve themselves. It was only these types of difficult situations would led to this kind of serious thinking. Time passed. Dancing Rain would send out a few long-ranged attacks from time to time, but it wasn't enough to affect the assault onto Little Cold Hands by Tyranny's three long-ranged attackers. Happy's three players weren't taking much damage, but Han Wenyi was having a rough time. He was being bombarded with spells and bullets from an elementalist and two gunners. What's worse, two of these attackers specialized in AoE attacks, making it feel like he had nowhere to run to. I don't believe it. Quote, a message from Fang Rui jumped out. Boundless Sea suddenly took a large step forward. Su Mucheng saw this and had Dancing Ran retreat. Yes. The pro players watching the match nodded their heads. They were taking advantage of the fact that strikers had very low range. Their weakness was that the area under their control was small. Retreat and go around. It might take more time than going in a straight line, but it was definitely one way to get past him. Boundless Sea and Dancing Rain didn't only retreat. One went left while the other went right, so Han Wenqing could only deal with one of them. But Han Wenqing wasn't troubled at all. He didn't even glance at the two of them. It seemed like he knew how they would respond. His desert dust focused solely on Tang Ro's soft mist. The two had previously fought in the group arena. It had been an intense fight. In the end, Tang Ro relied on her health advantage to win over Han Wenqing. However, in the team competition, this time, Tang Ro was losing. The map affected her too much. In this environment, Tang Ro had no way to only concentrate on attacking. After a few exchanges, Desert Dust used an Emperor's Fist, pushing Soft Mist 10 steps back. Turn around, sprint. Desert Dust was AEAD of Dancing Rain and Boundless Sea, and he headed straight for Little Cold Hands. Kill. His intentions were obvious. Boundless Sea and Dancing Rain gave chase. Suddenly, a storm of fire rained down on them. A swap. Tyranny had made a swap. Han Wenqing's Desert Dust attacked Little Cold Hands, while the three long-ranged attackers targeted Dancing Rain and Boundless Sea. Blossoms of Light and magic explosions swallowed the two of them. Even though Boundless Sea activated Chi Wave Shield as a defensive option, he couldn't completely protect both of them with it. Dancing Rain didn't have any defensive skills. Breaking out forcefully would be unwise. Su Mucheng could only have Dancing Rain return fire to see if she could create an opening. This isn't too bad for Happy. Li Yibo analyzed the recent changes in the fight. If this continues, both healers will be in a 1v1, and it'll likely end in a trade, healer for healer. Li Yibo continued. I see. Pan Lin nodded. The broadcast switched over to the fight between Ye Zhu and Zhang Xinji. The king of 1v1s against a squishy cleric. It was obvious who would win. It was simply a matter of time. The sacred fire on Lord Grimm had worn off a long time ago. He quickly used several movement skills to close in on a movable rock. The two were rather far from the rest of the battle. They were no longer on the sand dune. Ye Zhu didn't show any mercy, while Zhang Xinji did his best to survive. The two master tacticians knew where the key to this battle was. It could even be said that this key had been formed because of their clash in tactics. However, neither of them spared a moment to take a look at the situation over there. Even against a cleric, Yishu didn't relax. Because from a movable rock's direction of escape, he could see Zhang Xinji's intention. Not far ahead was the support zone. The switching of players was protected by the system. No attacks could interrupt it. If Zhang Xinji reached there, he could swap with Tyranny's sixth player, Lin Jingyan. Of course, there was a time restriction on switching players. Players couldn't just keep switching back and forth however they liked. However, just one switch was enough. Tyranny would be able to protect their important healer. As for the other end, Tyranny held the initiative. If Happy couldn't save their healer, and Zhang Xinji's immovable rock was able to escape, it would be disastrous for Happy. Even if Little Cold Hands was rescued in the end, it wouldn't be a problem for Tyranny. They would certainly retreat back ahead of time and rescue Zhang Xinji. Tyranny would not lose out either way. Zhang Xinji liked safe and reliable plans. Yishu obviously wasn't going to let him have his way. Lord Grimm held onto a removable rock tightly, not giving him a chance to run. Zhang Xinji obviously couldn't pray that Yishu would make a mistake. He never believed in placing his hopes on luck. He persevered and waited. WuxRWorldAudio.com. He was waiting for an opportunity, waiting for an opening when Yishu attacked. It's here. Zhang Xinji was calm and cautious. This sort of personality made it easy for people to mistake him for having low hand speed. However, ever since he had joined the Alliance, he had never fallen out of the top 10 in hand speed. Glory's number 1 healer was top tier in reaction speed and hand speed even among pro players. Charge. The robed cleric suddenly used this bold knight skill. For spectators familiar with the Glory competitive scene, it wasn't anything novel. Pro characters were meant solely for PvP. As a result, many of their skill choices were different than those who need to do dungeon quests. For healers focused on PvP, learning a low-level skill from a priest class like a knight was nothing strange. When the opponent closed in, this sort of movement skill was very useful. A movable rock had used charge when he first tried to escape, but in the end, his movement capabilities couldn't compare to an unspecialized. He was quickly caught. Zhang Xinji didn't hastily use charge as soon as he could. He couldn't underestimate Yishu. Even if it was an instant cast skill, it required the right timing. He finally found an opportunity. He instantly charged out like a warrior. As soon as he used charge, his vision was blocked. The myriad manifestations umbrella opened in its shield form. Yishu had reacted in the end. The shield was big, and the edges of the shield were able to block the charge. Clerics looked amazing when they used charge. Their weapon was oftentimes a cross. When they used charge, their cross would float in front of them, radiating with a holy light as if it were guiding the cleric. Unfortunately, this holy light encountered a shield. Charge couldn't be completely nulled with a shield. What's more, because of how big the umbrella shield was, it was rather light. In terms of priority, it was considered a weak shield. Even though a cleric's charge couldn't compare to a knight's, it couldn't be completely blocked. A movable rock's silver weapon, backlight cross, shined with white light, pulling a movable rock forward. Lord Grimm twisted his body, forcing his center of mass down to stop himself from sliding back. The distance that Lord Grimm slid back was rather unexpected. The terrain was the reason. The two were situated on loose sand. With a push, the sand gave way. The friction from sand couldn't compare to that of solid ground. By the time Lord Grimm's feet had sunk far enough into the sand to create enough resistance to stop the charge, the skill duration was almost over. A movable rock had pushed farther than expected, but it still wasn't enough to reach the support zone. Suddenly, light burst out from a movable rock's backlight cross, creating a circle of light. It looked astonishing, but the surface of the sand didn't seem to be affected by it. However, Lord Grimm, who was still holding up the Myriad Manifestations umbrella, was directly pushed back several steps by this light. Paladin skill, Angel's might. End chapter. The King's Avatar. Chapter 1532. Post-match What Ifs. Audio source, WurshaWorldAudiobook.com. Chapter 1532. Post-match What Ifs. Translator, Nomyami. Editor, Nomyami. Paladin skill, Angel's might. The skill forced the target back. It ignored super armor and resistance from shields. After the Blue Rain home game against Happy, many analysts had mentioned that if Blue Rain's healer, Zhu Jingxi, had used an Angel's might against Boundless Sea and Steamed Bun Invasion, the outcome of that match would have been very different. There are always all sorts of what-ifs after a match. And in this match between Happy and Tyranny, there were what-ifs as well. An Angel's might had once again become a hot topic. Happy had lost. The Angel's might from Zhang Xinji's immovable rock hadn't been the only turning point, but it was the most important one in the team competition. Angel's might forced Lord Grimm back, and Zhang Xinji was able to take advantage of that opportunity to reach the support zone. By the time Lord Grimm was able to recover, his opponent had become Lin Jingyan's Dark Thunder. Post-match analysis had pointed out that Lord Grimm could have theoretically intercepted a movable rock before he reached the support zone. But in the end, he was one step too slow. One reason was that Zhang Xinji's reaction speed and hand speed weren't slow. Another reason was that perhaps Yishu had gotten old, or perhaps it was because the exhaustion that Tyranny had built up onto Yishu had finally taken effect. He had been just a hair off. No one could pinpoint the exact reason, not even Yishu himself. Happy need to face the reality of it. The outcome of the second round between Happy and Tyranny ended in Happy's defeat. The two teams had returned back to the starting point. This set would be decided in the third game, and because Tyranny had placed higher than Happy in the regular season, the game would be held in Tyranny's home stadium. However, the home stadium advantage was only limited to additional morale from the home team's fans and income from ticket sales. Neither team had the advantage of choosing the maps in the deciding match. The maps would be chosen randomly, and they would be maps that no Glory player had ever seen before. The Glory Game Company had created maps specifically for the playoffs. Before these maps were used, no team would have information on them. The maps would be randomly picked from this collection of playoff maps on the day of the match. It seemed as if neither side had the map advantage. However, Tyranny consisted of experienced old generals. Their ability to adapt to maps was absolutely higher than Happy's rookies. With the match taking place in Tyranny's home stadium, even though they wouldn't be choosing the maps, the support from the crowd would certainly have a positive effect on their morale. The break between Game 2 and Game 3 was 2 days. It would be unwise for Happy to fly to City H and then fly back. As a result, during these 2 days, Tyranny could adjust their mindsets to face this final deciding game in the environment that they were most familiar with. As for Happy, their only choice was to slowly digest their recent defeat in this unfamiliar environment. The night that match ended, in this unfamiliar city and unfamiliar hotel, there were few people on Happy who were able to sleep soundly. Chen Guo was someone who always worried, and sure enough, she wasn't able to sleep. She rolled around in her bed, wanting to find someone to chat with, but at the same time, she didn't want to bother anyone else. Unable to calm down, she browsed the internet for 3 or 4 hours. Half the time, she was simply staring at a blank page. There was still one more game left. It could be said that the battle had only just begun. Why did she need to be so nervous? Chen Guo consoled herself, and then took a look at the page she had just opened. What a coincidence, it was a poll showing their chances in the next game. Tyranny 87, 3%. Happy 12, 7%. Fuck. Chen Guo couldn't help but curse. The poll was too lopsided. The first game had been Happy's home game against Tyranny. At that time, people had favored Tyranny, but in the end, Happy had won. As a result, in Happy's away game against Tyranny, although people still favored Tyranny, the support for Happy had been considerably higher. Why did it suddenly become this lopsided for the third game? Chen Guo was irritated, thinking that it was unfair. But in her heart, she knew that her uneasiness and worry was because she might be unconsciously thinking the same thing. Even though half of those 3 or 4 hours were her staring blankly at the computer, she had still looked over quite a few comments on their prospects. Chen Guo had a certain level of ability now. She was no longer the same as before, where she simply believed anything that seemed somewhat reasonable. When she read commentaries online, even when it was by a well-known analyst, she wouldn't blindly believe it. She would think on her own and come up with her own opinion. But the more she looked, the more nervous she became because she agreed with many of these opinions. She couldn't come up with anything to refute them. Such as the advantage that Tyranny had with the random maps, such as Happy having trouble adjusting in an unfamiliar environment, such as the blow to Happy's morale after their recent defeat. These were all valid points. No matter how much Chen Guo didn't want to think about them, they would still be there. Especially the part about morale. Chen Guo had personally seen the disappointment and listlessness from Happy after the loss. Everyone in Happy is strong. After a night's rest, they'll be back to normal. Chen Guo kept telling herself this, but she herself couldn't fall asleep. After browsing the internet for those 3 or 4 hours, she still couldn't sleep. After seeing how big the gap was between the two teams in the poll, she definitely couldn't sleep. Chen Guo furiously gave a vote for Happy. Nothing changed. The disparity continued to stare back at her. At this moment, her QQ flashed. Chen Guo checked. It was Yi Zhu. "You're not going to sleep?" Yi Zhu asked. "You're not sleeping either." Chen Guo saw that, like herself, Yi Zhu hadn't slept. She wasn't happy at all about it, though, it only made her feel more depressed. In her eyes, Yi Zhu was Happy's unshakable pillar. No matter what situation they were in, he would never waver. But it looked like even he couldn't sleep. It seemed like the problem was far more grave than she had imagined. "Oh, I got up to steal veggies," Yi Zhu said. Chen Guo was speechless. She had been with the guy for 2 years. When had he ever cared about veggies? "Why can't I steal your veggies?" Yi Zhu asked. Chen Guo was furious. She hadn't taken care of her farm for many years and hadn't harvested her veggies in a long time. Once someone stole your veggies, you wouldn't have any veggies left for anyone else to steal. These were the basics. Did he really think he could trick her, saying that he got up to steal her veggies? "Go to bed. Everything will be fine," Yi Zhu said. Chen Guo really wanted to ask what he meant by fine, but in the end, she simply typed out in "Okay." TLN, the author is talking about Happy Farm, which was a very popular farming social network game in China that came out in 2008. You can steal other people's veggies in this game. The most notable clone, rip-off of Happy Farm is Farmville, released in 2009. She turned off her computer and went to bed. Chen Guo tossed and turned restlessly. She would go to sleep for a bit and then wake up. Who knew how many times she had woken up during the night? When she got up to take a look at herself in the morning, she had 2 dark bags under her eyes. Morale. WushOurWorldAudio.com. Chen Guo thought to herself. How was she supposed to see everyone? Her nervousness and uneasiness were obvious. It might infect the others. Chen Guo was still feeling gloomy when she heard a knock from the door. Who is it? Chen Guo asked. Are you up, Guo Guo? Tang Rou answered. Chen Guo opened the door. Tang Rou was standing outside in her pajamas. When Tang Rou saw Chen Guo, she immediately let out a laugh. Looks like you didn't sleep well again, Tang Rou said. Why do you mean again? Chen Guo mumbled unhappily. It was true, though. Ever since Team Happy had become official, Chen Guo had often lost a lot of sleep. Every night before a match, she would toss and turn, unable to sleep. Whenever Happy won a match, she wouldn't be able to sleep because she was too excited. Whenever Happy lost a match, she wouldn't be able to sleep because she was too depressed. Back when she was an excellent era fan, it would only happen occasionally. Now that she was completely invested into Happy, from the Challenger League to the playoffs, Chen Guo had countless sleepless nights. Hurry up and get ready. Let's get breakfast, Tang Rou said. Chen Guo went to wash her face and asked, what about everyone else? Yi Zhu told everyone that was up to go to the practice room, Tang Rou said. Why wasn't I told? Chen Guo was puzzled. Tang Rou bent down and picked up a slip of paper from under Chen Guo's door. She handed it over to Chen Guo for her to take a look. A slip of paper. How crude. Chen Guo looked down on it in disdain. He was afraid of disturbing the others, Tang Rou said. Chen Guo stared blankly. It was a good method to communicate with them without disturbing anyone. There was no set time either. It was simply whenever you got up. Chen Guo wasn't in the mood to try go back to bed. She quickly tidied herself up. She didn't bother putting on any makeup to hide the bags under her eyes and dragged Tang Rou out the door with her. She wasn't in the mood to eat breakfast, but since Tang Rou wanted to, she couldn't just let her starve. After eating breakfast, the two went to the practice room. In away games, the home team would provide him practice rooms. The big teams would have practice rooms specifically for away teams. In the early days, when teams seeked victory by fair means or foul, teams used to intentionally make the away team practice rooms worse to affect the away team's practice and mood. Later, the Alliance took charge and eliminated this sort of underhanded move by investigating the practice rooms given to away teams ahead of time. Nowadays, no team would suffer from this sort of practice. Happy had used Tyranny's away team practice room before in the regular season and the previous game. The room was quite nice. With Tyranny's personality, they would never fall so low as to engage in these types of dirty practices. When the two arrived at the practice room, Yi Zhu was already there. There was also Su Mucheng, Qiao Yivan, Luo Ji, and An Wenyi. The others weren't there. Chen Guo looked around. She couldn't tell you how they were doing from their expressions, but at the very least, no one had dark circles under their eyes like her. She casually gave them a greeting. Chen Guo and Tang Rou went to find their seats. No one said anything. Only the sound of keyboard tapping and mouse clicking could be heard. Yi Zhu got up and waved to Tang Rou. Here's a video I want you to take a look at. Sure, Tang Rou nodded her head and opened the video that Yi Zhu sent her. It was a video of Soft Mist showing clips from last night's match. Soon afterwards, Yi Zhu got up from his seat and headed over towards her. End chapter.